Do you have full access to all of your emotions? It sounds like a simple question, doesn't it? But if you feel like you need to cry, are you able to fully cry? If you feel optimistic, are you able to fully appreciate the heights and the possibilities of that emotion? Or do you protect yourself from that in case it goes wrong? If you feel anxious, are you able to sit with it and fully feel that anxiety? Or do you relate to a coping mechanism to cover it up and to manage that discomfort? Suddenly, that original question of do you have full access to all of your emotions, it feels different when we consider what this might practically look like. And I've got a great book recommendation for you today, which will explore this topic. And although it isn't explicitly related to Jung's shadow work, it is clearly a very complementary idea that will help to make shadow integration more practical. I've received plenty of comments and private messages asking about practical shadow work, so this is another video to help explore this topic further. I'll be using the words persona and shadow throughout this video, so if you're looking for an explanation of what that means and how they form, please watch this other video first, which I'll link below. I'm going to give more quotes than usual for this video because Pete Walker has a fantastic way with words, and it'll help to really get the soul of this book across in a way that it really deserves. And that's the one thing that's really stood out to me from reading this, and other works by him as well. It's the integrity and the honesty and the love and the soul, which is obvious on every single page. Okay, right, let's dive in and let's have a look at the 4 fundamental dynamics of emotional nature. To help illustrate and fully embody the difference between thinking and feeling, Pete Walker outlines 4 different dynamics. The first dynamic he refers to as holism. So, quoting from page 37, I'm going to quote on here, and you can follow along if this will show up in focus. Holism refers to the fact that the emotional nature cannot be broken down into individual, separate feelings existing independently from one another. Feeling is bound to holism more than thinking. If I think about my day, it's easy to categorize my thoughts. Thoughts about career go over here, relationships over here, the future over here, what I'm going to eat over here, and so on. They might cross over, but ultimately they're quite distinct. And more importantly, I can choose or at least influence my own choice of thoughts more or less at will. So when I'm at work, I'm thinking work-related thoughts, and I can largely put thoughts about my hobbies, for example, just to one side. But that isn't the case with emotions. I can't just choose my favourite emotions or more relevant emotions or more useful emotions just on a whim. And more significantly, I can't just choose not to be sad or angry or frustrated. I can't simply tell myself, right, I'm going to be happy now, because emotions can't be categorised and dealt with in the same way that thoughts can. Page 38 words this very nicely, just over here. No matter how sophisticated advertisers become in convincing us that what they are selling creates preferred emotional states, their products will bring us rashes and gastrointestinal distress before they can bring us love and happiness. And he takes this thought further, which I've highlighted just in green here. And this is the key point for holism, and it shows how our emotions are all tangled up with each other. Real joy cannot be purchased without a requisite amount of grief, as love cannot be purchased without strife or forgiveness without blame. And here's the key point. Wrath, fear, and sadness are as irreplaceable to the fully feeling person as love, trust, and joy. Our lives become more resplendent when we use the entire wardrobe of emotional colour, not just pink, glitter, and baby blue. Although this book isn't explicitly about Jung's shadow work, you can probably see the complementary themes crossing over already. If we're to have an authentic personality, it needs to take into account the heights and the depths of who we are and who we could yet become. If I just pretended that all I felt was love and joy, then that is simply a performance. It's my persona doing all the talking, a one-dimensional, shallow, predictable mask that I use to fit in with the world and to gain social acceptance. But a person becomes real, not just a persona, when their depths are taken into consideration. When they look at what the persona is covering up. Repressing fear and sadness will just lead to enormous emotional blocks that will just cause havoc under the surface, and it'll lead to all kinds of distorted projections. And I could word and quote this entire section just because it's all worded so beautifully, but his point is clear. We can't simply choose one emotion over another just because we prefer it. Joy and sadness both come along for the ride together, so there's no point making a choice to allow one and banish the other, because all that's going to happen is that you'll inevitably banish both of them. It's like preferring the heat over the shade. The shade is a natural occurrence and a counterpart when there is heat. You can't just have one without the other. So this leads us quite nicely onto the second dynamic, which is on polarity. The principle is probably best explained by the fact that the book itself is called the Tao of fully feeling. The white is the counterpart to the black, the yin to the yang, the heat to the shade, as we've just mentioned. And Ken Wilber words this absolutely perfectly. In seeking to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative, we have forgotten that the positive is defined only in terms of the negative. To destroy the negative is, at the same time, to destroy all possibility of enjoying its opposite. I've naturally explained a lot about this dynamic in the point about holism, but it's worth emphasizing this aspect of the positive being found in the negative and vice versa. To be fully in touch with our feelings is to peek at our shadow selves, it's our private selves, as well as that personality that we proudly display to the world. To quote Pete Walker, again, this time in purple, just this section here. The richness and authenticity of a person's laugh parallels the availability of his tears. The thrill of an act of courage is measured in the degree of fear that it overcomes. The enrichment of love relates directly to its contrast with loneliness. The depth of forgiveness depends on the felt intensity of the blame. If I want to be seen to be courageous, then we will have to put ourselves in situations where that value is going to be required. To be courageous is to act in the face of fear, uncertainty, and anxiety. If we can't accept those elements, then we aren't really acting with courageousness at all, and so we undermine ourselves from the very beginning. In my many years of classroom teaching experience, I've always been so proud of those students who, despite the fear of making their voice heard in a classroom, still put their hand up and risked getting the answer wrong. It was exactly that acceptance of fear and anxiety that allowed the courageousness to be celebrated. It was being able to be in touch with the depths that allowed them to soar to the heights. And being a fully feeling, alive and vital person is about widening the psyche to allow for a crossover between the persona and the shadow. And amazing things happen in that grey zone. But anyway, on to point 3, which is ambivalence. In simple terms, ambivalence is about holding and feeling multiple and usually multiple contradictory emotions all at once. Rather than worrying about calling them good or bad emotions and reserving them for good or bad events, it is simply noticing that the feelings that are arising. Noticing that when you get a promotion, you might feel excited and scared and overwhelmed and joyous all at once, for example, and there's probably more emotions on top of that still. Sometimes this has a big impact on your behavior too. So, for example, crying. If we talk very broadly here, there are a lot of men especially who cannot be seen to be cry because it is seen to be not masculine, and so crying tears of any kind is forbidden. Ambivalence here is pointing to the fact that we can cry tears of relief, of pain, of overwhelming joy, of massive pride in overcoming a difficulty, in a sense of awe that life might be even more beautiful than you could have ever predicted, and so on. Perhaps many of these all at once. And in keeping with these other two dynamics, fully feeling is about expressing both or all aspects of these ambivalent feelings. You might not express everything there and then, but at least make a personal note to express the unexpressed at some point and to honour that note too. It's a process of building self-esteem and honouring your own word to yourself that will build a lot of self-respect, which again is key because that confidence then can allow for even more expression in the future. Another way of saying this is the more mature your psyche and ego structure, the more you can begin to safely integrate more shadow patterns and behaviours. I'd love to go into the dynamic of splitting here, but I feel like it's going to be a bit too much jargon for just one video, so I'll save that for another time. But just to finish off this section and just to give you a practical idea too, ambivalence should be ultimately functional for you. Explore each of the emotions as they come up and thoroughly explore them. I've already made a video on active imagination, and that's where this idea would become very useful. So explore what would happen if you fully expressed that emotion. Explore what would happen to your life if you hid it away and refused to express it. What happens after 1 year or 5 years or 10 years? How does it impact those people around you in an obvious or a non-obvious way? What does it want from you and what is it blocking from you? And how would your life be different if you changed your relationship to this emotion? So when I say I fully explore the emotion, that's what I'm referring to. And hopefully just some of those questions there might spark a bit of an idea. But anyway, last point, and it's all going to be about flow. I'll keep this one quite short because it's quite clear. Emotions come, emotions go, the different ones come, and then they go as well, and so on. Every single hour, every single day. The key point about flow is mentioned here on page 49, which I'm just going to paraphrase because I'm aware of the length of this video. Unfortunately, most of us only go with the flow when it is in a preferred direction. At other times, we struggle fiercely against unpreferred feelings and become entrapped by them. Avoidance of unwanted emotions also commonly leaves us trapped in chronic, low-grade manifestations of them. Many long-enduring moods are caused by repressed emotions that slowly and biliously leak into consciousness. Essentially, a mood is just a very ineffective way of processing and expressing a feeling. Rather than having a mood go on for days, weeks, months, or years, it makes more sense to go with the flow and allocate time to actually express what clearly is already trying to be expressed. And just to make that really clear, go with the actual flow, not just the preferred flow. Again, this is where the persona might have a preference, but the shadow holds its own story as well. Don't just choose the persona over the shadow every single time, otherwise life will just end up feeling really stale and empty. Go with the actual flow, not the preferred flow. And this takes us all the way back to the very introduction of this chapter on page 34, which is lovely because it's Alexander Lowen, who is somebody that I really respect and admire, who starts this chapter. The life of the body is feeling. Feeling alive, vibrant, good, excited, angry, sad, joyous, and finally contented. It is the lack of feeling or confusion about feelings that brings people to therapy. What a book this is. If you're dealing with a lot of heavy emotions, or you're trying to process difficulties from the past, or looking to explore issues that came up during childhood, then this book will be a wonderful companion for you. Exploring a lot of these ideas with a journal or a close friend or a counselor or a therapist might also help to create quite a safe container that allows for this emotion to be fully expressed. And that's what shadow work is all about. It's understanding what is actually going on under the surface and having the courage to face it and see what it is that it's trying to tell us, and learning to incorporate those lessons into our wider personality. It's just going to pull the strings behind the scenes if not. So we'll just find ourselves in that chronic low-level mood all the time, as well as confused as to why we're even in that mood to begin with. So do your past, present, and future self a favour, and those around you too, and have the bravery to start beginning a process of fully feeling. Anyway, plenty more lessons to come on this channel to help structure this process and make it more practical for you as well as safe, reliable, and repeatable. All right, see you soon.